Shavua Tov, everybody. We are tonight going to be talking about what it means to rejoice in the Lord. This is a common phrase that you'll find in Psalms. What does it mean to actually find joy in God? And also, we can break that question down. First of all, is it joy in knowing God? Is it joy in being in a relationship with God and experiencing God? What does it mean, what does it mean to feel joy toward God? Do you even need a relationship with God in order to have joy, in, that, divine power? So these are kind of the questions we're going to be asking tonight, and we're going to be doing so using some of the writings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. His claim to fame is he is, you can call him the founding rabbi of Chabad. Of course, Chabad, we're all familiar with Chabad Lubavitch, not Chabad of Liadi. That's because Shneur Zalman, while he was the first rabbi, of the Chabad dynasty, it was actually his disciple, who I believe was his son, who, his son Dov Ber, who actually moved to Lubavitch and really started the dynasty. So Shneur Zalman of Liadi's most famous work is the Tanya, and we're going to be looking at some of the texts from that tonight. It's even a technical text about how God emanates into this world, and we are going to jump right into it, and then using the text, we're going to answer some of those questions and go deeper into what it means to relate to God. If you look in the description, part of what we're going to be talking about tonight is how light is a metaphor for God. So hold on, we'll get there. So here we go. This is from the Tanya. So here's a way to make the soul glad. We're all looking for joy. So what is it that can actually make us joyful? He says, especially when one person senses from time to time that one's soul needs to be refined and illumined by rejoicing in the heart. One should engage in deep contemplation, depicting in one's mind and understanding the idea of God's true unity, blessed be He. That is to say that God fills all worlds, those on high and those beneath, and even the fullness of earth is God's glory. In relation to God, everything is really nothing at all. God alone is actually the upper and lower worlds, just as God was alone before the 6 days of creation. So we're going to start, Shneur Zalman of Liadi is kind of setting the tone here with the idea that there's an intimate connection between knowing God and joy. The ideas of God filling the upper worlds and the lower worlds, these are, Kabbalistic notions of how the universe was created. We're not going to go into them now, but suffice it to say, he's starting by making the connection between joy and knowing God, and also planting the seed for this idea that God fills the world. We're going to talk a little bit more about what that means in the coming sections. So, and we'll continue in the Tanya. So even in the space into which this world was created, heavens and earth and all their hosts, God alone fills this space. And even now, He is alone, without any change whatsoever, because all creatures are annihilated in God, just as the letters by means of which speech and thought take place are annihilated in their source and root, that is to say, in the real being and essence of the soul, its 10 aspects of Chokhmah, Bina, and Da'at, and so forth. So, Rabbi Zalman is giving us the first analogy of what it means that God fills this world, and this idea that the whole world, all its creatures, and everything becomes annihilated in relationship to God. So the first metaphor that he offers here in terms of what it means that the whole world is annihilated in God is the relationship that we have to language. Language is formed with letters and with vowels. Language is formed, we can write it out, and those letters and vowels have meaning, in and of themselves. But when we speak the words of our heart and our soul, it's like those letters are nothing. We can hold that, as the first metaphor, which is to say, even though they do have some essence, when you write down the letter B, it makes a B sound. But in a complete sentence, in a complete thought, when I'm speaking to you and you're speaking to me, we don't think once about, the spelling of the word, about the letters, each and every letter of each and every word. We think really about the thought and about what we're trying to express. So in the same way that expression and thought are, bigger, are esoteric, are beyond letters, they can be captured in letters. In the same way that God, who is bigger, expansive, more complicated, unknowable compared to this world, can be captured, or rather, God's essence fills the creatures of this world. So that's the first analogy he'll offer, is, our thoughts and feelings are to words and letters, like God's essence is to the whole world. I'll also mention this last line he says, that is to say, these letters are annihilated in the real being and essence of the soul, its 10 aspects of Chokhmah, Bina, Da'at, and so forth. But those 10 aspects are the Sfirot, the same Sfirot that we talked about last week, that God uses to kind of reveal God's presence in this world, to soak this world in God's presence, through those Sfirot. There's a Kabbalistic idea that also those very same Sfirot exist in our soul. We are made in the image of God, and so those Sfirot actually exist inside us as well. And when we relate to the world, we relate through those Sfirot on a microcosm of the way God is relating through those very same Sfirot. And so that's why he says we're permitted to use analogies of human beings in trying to understand God, because we are made in the image of God, because we share the same essence as God. We can use our experience in the world and analogies with human beings in order to understand God. So let's continue. Rabbi Zalman writes, "We have also given elsewhere an illustration taken from the physical world for this idea. The shining and the light of the sun are annihilated in the sun itself in the heavens. For without doubt up there too its light shines, and extends even more so than it extends and shines in space below. Only there it is annihilated in its source and enjoys no existence at all. So by analogy, in the total annihilation of existence of the world and the fullness thereof in relation to its source, which is the light of ENSO, blessed be God." There's a concept that God is what's called ENSO. That's where God starts in the Kabbalistic tradition, which means without end. It literally translates to without end, but it means kind of an essential nothingness. Yet somehow there's a light that emanates, that shines from this nothingness and fills the universe. So he says, let's take an analogy from the sun. Let's start with just any light that we can shine. if you've ever tried to shine a flashlight at the sun, then you'll notice that you cannot even tell that the flashlight is shining. That's another way to understand the idea that everything is annihilated in God, which is to say it's essentially nothing because it's all the same. God is light, the light from the flashlight is light, and so the truth of the world is that everything is united, everything is one, everything is God. And so, but he goes even further in using the sun as an analogy to understand what ENSO is, what this divine nothingness is, how it could be so empty, and how it can be so illuminating. He says, surely the light of the sun shines just at the sun itself. If you were to be able to go and get close enough to the sun, I mean, the light's still going to shine, and it's going to shine even brighter the closer you get to the sun, of course. So he says, what is one ray of the sun's light compared to the whole sun? It is just like you're shining a flashlight at the sun. It becomes essentially nothing. And if it's like that with one ray, why not two? Why not three? Why not each and every individual ray completely annihilated, completely negated in the light of the whole? In that sense, the sun, he says, experiences essentially no existence at all. Now, that is radical and not logical. Surely the sun exists, it's there, it's a big gas ball. But what he's saying, is, logically sound. One ray, compared to the light of the sun, is like nothing. And so the whole sun itself can essentially be seen as a big emanating nothingness, filling our solar system, our world, our planet, with its light. In the same way, God too is essentially Ein Sof, self-negating. In God's greatness, any part of God becomes like nothing. In God's greatness, the whole universe is illuminated in that light and becomes filled with God's presence. Now, what that means, it's not like the sun. What that means is you and I, all the animals, all the trees, all the rocks, the seas, the planets, the stars, everything is an emanation of God's indescribable and unfathomable existence. Okay, we'll continue in the Tanya. He says, now, when one contemplates on this idea very profoundly, one's heart leaps in joy, and one's soul is glad. There is abundant joy, and in this belief there is gladness and song, with all the heart and all the soul and all the might. For this is to be near to God quite literally. This is the whole purpose for which God and all worlds were created, that God should dwell among those down below. How great is the joy of an ordinary inferior person who draws close to a king, who has agreed to be his guest and to live with him in his house. How much more so then, when one is so near to the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be God, who dwells with him. As it is written, for who is he that hath pledged his heart to approach unto me, saith the Lord. That's a quote from Jeremiah. What we've said so far is, this is how one finds joy. In the same way that when one is hosting a dignitary in their house, when one goes about their life being close to God, keeping in mind the entire time that everything they're seeing is an emanation of God, then one has that same joy of just being close to God, of being close in the same way that we feel, joy if we were to host, a real king or a queen in our house. So too, when we, host God in our existence by admitting the fact that everything is just one in its, in its godliness, then that's where we find joy. I'll continue in the text. So it says, just as one rejoices when one is left an inheritance of a very large amount of money for which one has not toiled, so, and even more so, we should rejoice over the heritage that our ancestors left us, namely, the doctrine of God's unity and truth, that even on this earth, down below, there is none else beside him. And this is the meaning of God's dwelling down below. So, we are given a gift, he says, from our parents, from our grandparents, from our great-grandparents. We've been inherited this doctrine of Adonai Echad, that God is one. And we should, in the same way that one would rejoice when being left a monetary gift, we've been left a key, a spiritual gift that can help unlock joy in our very existence. I want to point out a verse in Deuteronomy. This is Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 35. And I want to use this opportunity to show, kind of the Hasidic Kabbalistic approach to text as opposed to maybe a more academic one. So, and this connects, to what we just read. So in chapter 35, it says, you have been shown in order to know that Adonai is God and there is none beside him. In the Hebrew, it's Ata hareta lada'at ki Adonai hu Elohim ein od milvado. You have been shown that Adonai is Ha-Elohim, God is God, and there is none other beside him. So what this means in the context of Deuteronomy is don't worship idols. But what this means in the context of Kabbalah and Hasidut, when we say Ein Od Milvado, there is none other besides God, they read that, and we read that as an expansive statement, saying there is nothing else besides God. And this is the Hasidic approach to life. It's the main, one of the main tenets of, of early Hasidic practice that I think is worth adopting is this idea that you can be in context, in relationship with God everywhere and in everything. Each piece of this world, everything in your normal daily life is actually somehow a revelation of a different aspect of God. Everything is part of God. My son asked me today why I wear a kippah. And the answer I told him, comes from this idea. It's twofold. I told him it's to remind myself that God is everywhere. Which is to say, we cover our heads as a sign of modesty. But it's a reminder that in every moment one is in relationship with God. No matter who you're talking to, no matter, frankly, what you're talking about. Each thing is an aspect of God, revealing God's self to you. Now, it doesn't mean that there's not work to do in repairing this world. We can't just sit back and put our feet up and say, because all is God, all is right. As human beings, we have the power to take this godliness, the intellect we've been given, and use it or abuse it. Part of what we're doing now during the Sfirat HaOmer is we are looking at those Sfirot. Each day we have 2 Sfirot from the bottom 7 that we hold in relationship with each other for that day. And there's actually a declaration that one reads, traditionally, if one is doing this in kind of a Kabbalistic way, where they say, God, may you help me repair any damage I have done in these 2 Sfirot. And we can use our intellect and our power as human beings either to, see this world as an object that we can use for our own benefit, or we can use it and elevate it, identify all of the, what it means that each thing is an aspect of God. And we can, in focusing on those sefirot, ask ourselves, what am I doing in my life that I need to fix in order to become more whole, in order to bring out the best in the world around me? And each one of the sefirot has a different energy, each one has a different meaning, a different concept, and what it means to be a human being and just relate into the world. So just because everything is God does not mean that we don't have work to do. The whole point of counting the sefirot during Shavuot is this is the work we're doing. We're doing literally, this is where the idea of tikkun olam comes from. We're in focusing on how we are relating to the world. We are creating a kind of we're fixing the equilibrium so that way we can have a more balanced outlook and a more positive impact. I'll read just one more excerpt from this section of the Tanya. So Rabbi Zalman writes, this is why the rabbis say in the Talmud that 613 laws were given to Israel, but the prophet Habakkuk came and reduced them to one great principle. Habakkuk is one of our minor prophets. You can find his small book in your Tanakh. So Habakkuk says, the righteous shall live by God's faith. This means that it is as if one only had one single law to carry out, and that is of faith. For through faith on its own, one will come to carry out all of the other precepts. For when one's heart leaps for joy, in belief of the unity of God with limitless joy, as if the only command one had been given was this one, and that this was the whole purpose for which this person and all worlds were created, then this joy this person experiences will endow them with great strength and such vitality that one will be able to rise far above the obstacles that prevent one from carrying out the 613 laws. So he ends by saying that the prophet Habakkuk says that there is only really one mitzvah that we need to focus on, and that's to live a life of faith. And what is the life of faith? He says it's faith that Adonai Echad, that Ein Od Milvado, that God is one, there is nothing other than God. Because once one accepts the idea that God exists as everything in the universe, that God actually is emanating through each person, each object, each animal, each tree and plant, once one realizes that they can find joy by hosting God in God's life, by recognizing God in each and every relationship, then the mitzvot become easy to keep. It's easier to be kind. It's easier to be gracious. It's easier to just be a better, more wholesome person. So that, says Shneur Zalman of Liadi, is the secret to the joy of the soul, and the meaning of Adonai Echad, that God is one and there is none other. So with that, I hope that leaves you with some positive insights for the week. Tonight, by the way, it was the 10th night of the Omer, and we are focusing on the Sefira of Tiferet Shebegevura. Tiferet means beauty, and Gevura is strength. So you can ask yourself, obviously the Sefira will go much deeper than that, but you can ask yourself, what is, the beauty of strength that comes through you in this world? How can beauty be expressed through strength? When do you use strength in making something beautiful? When have you done that well? And to what extent do you need to work on that, whatever that means to you? So with that, Shavua Tov, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye.